Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Schwell. I serve as the lead learner for the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves CEWL, and you can always find out about everything we are doing right here at cool.us. That's CEWL.us. We are also proud to be sponsored by a grant from NEA and working closely with our state affiliate for the NEA, the SCEA. And if you're interested in joining our union, you can go to jointhescea.org. Hope you all are doing well tonight. I'm coming to you live from Columbia. I'm in a hotel room because tomorrow I will be going to the Adventure Museum to meet with a bunch of other groups from around the state at an event called Adventure Connects. And it was at Adventure Connects where I met tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Deborah DePaoli. She started her career in public education and community development at the age of 17, working with migrant farm workers and their children in Southern California. She served for years as a public school teacher and administrator, working with marginalized students, second language learners, under-resourced preschoolers, and the children of low-wage earners. Deborah has now lived in South Carolina for 18 years, where she currently works for the Institute for Child Success. That's the Institute for Child Success. She engages with families, agencies, and elected officials to advocate for children, equity in education, access to political power, and real opportunities for establishing generational wealth. Those are just some of the issues that Deborah is passionate about. And her presentation at the last Adventure Connects event really stood out to me. And I felt like we had the Venn diagram overlapped in a lot of areas in terms of what her values are and what she's working towards. So we invited her on tonight. And without further ado, let's bring on Deborah DePaoli. How are you doing tonight, Deborah?
I'm doing pretty well, Todd. How are you?
I'm doing great. Is there anything that was not in your bio that you'd like to share other than the fact that you have cats that you have outside the room?
That's right. Yeah, I have 3 cats and 2 dogs. The only other thing I would want to share is that I'm also a mother. I have 2 biological children. My daughter is a sophomore in college. My son is a senior in high school. And right now I have 2 foster sons living with us as well. So that also informs kind of the way I look at the world, being a mother myself.
So busy times, I'm sure, all the time. That's good.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask you a little bit more about, like, when I was reading through your bio about this work that you did with migrant farm workers in Southern California. Let's just kind of go back to that. I don't know if that's the sort of the origin story of Deborah, if that's kind of where your passion for all of this came from. But let's just go back to that. Tell a little bit more about that work that you did that you got you connected with this work for children.
Yeah, sure. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher. My 5th grade teacher, Miss York, inspired me, and I wanted to be a teacher. And I knew I wanted to teach in public school. So living in Southern California, I thought, oh, wow, I really need to learn Spanish, at least to be able to communicate with the parents of my children, my students. So out of high school, I had the opportunity to work with migrant farm laborers and their children, living in kind of the rural areas outside of San Diego. When I started, I had taken 2 years of high school Spanish. I could say things that were not super helpful, like I walk, you walked, we walked, they walked. So the woman who interviewed me saw something and said, yeah, we'd love to hire you. I started out kind of as a home visitor, kind of doing social work without much prep or training, but connecting families to resources in the community, advocating for children at their schools. And all the time, during that time I was studying at the university to become a teacher. So I think it really changed my perspective, or established the foundation of my perspective in a couple ways. One, the fact that I always worked with families before I worked just with students really solidified in my mind the fact that children are part of a family. It's not just the 25 children that are sitting in your classroom or the 762 children at the school where you're working, but they come from a family, they come from a community. And that's something that we really need to be mindful of in the way that we interact with them. And then also that really showed me that all parents want what's best for their children, whether they are parents who may have low educational attainment themselves, whether they speak another language, have a different country of origin, whatever differences they may have. Parents that some people might dismiss, a parent who spent some time behind bars, or a parent who has struggled with a substance use disorder. It just really showed me that all parents want what's best for their children. And then those of us who work in education, we can really partner with parents in a powerful way to make that happen.
Yeah. So is there a particular sort of like memory that you have of that work, that when you were first starting out? Is there a story that you'd like to share, something that stands out from that work that inspired you to keep going? Because I mean, this has been obviously you've been in this arena with children for a long time now. Can you think of any story that stands out for you that was like, wow, that was like a moment that sort of solidified I'm where I'm supposed to be?
Yes, I'll share one story. There was a child who was assigned to me. Her name is Marilu, and she was in middle school at the time. And I was assigned to go visit her at her apartment once a week, help her with homework, be sure she was on track. She had had some behavioral challenges at school. As I got to know the family, she had 3 brothers and sisters. She and her mom and her 3 brothers and sisters lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. Mom was not able to read or write. She was the only one in her family that was not in special education. She did not have an IEP, but her 3 little brothers and sisters did. And the school that she was attending, because of some of the behavioral challenges she had decided that the thing to do for her was have her only go to school half day. Let her go to school from 8:30 to 11:30, and then eat lunch and go home. And I remember thinking at that time, who comes up with these policies? This is a child who has a high ACEs score, has dealt with a lot of traumas, is living in a neighborhood that's not particularly safe. We're going to send her home by herself while her mom's at work and her 3 little brothers and sisters are in elementary school to do what exactly? And a couple years, well, probably 3 years later, I ran into her again, and she was already a mother herself. And it just really broke my heart. I'm a passionate supporter of public education. And I believe, and I've seen, that the huge majority of teachers and school administrators are doing amazing things to support children and educate them. But then sometimes you hear about these kinds of policies that, instead of supporting a particular student who needs an extra measure of emotional support, practical support, academic support, instead there are sometimes these policies that actually are working against those students. So yes, Todd, I think that was just one of those moments where I was like, oh, wow, yes, I am going to stay in this arena and do what I can to be sure that all students, even students, that maybe have several factors working against them, are
Right.
getting what they need.
Right. And I remember, now that you're talking, I remember us kind of talking a little bit, and I spoke about the documentary, The Rehumanizing School, and I think you and I talked about, and I think you talked about some of the things, and I was like, oh my, I was saying amen over and over again about what you're seeing in the schools in terms of policies that aren't really they're not really serving the best interests of children. They're more serving the interests of adults who just have these arbitrary goals and want to. This is how I put it. They want to rob children of their childhood to meet the arbitrary goals of adults. And I think one of the issues I have is I'm obviously also a fierce advocate for public education, but I'm also a fierce critic of the system and a lot of its policies.
Mhm.
And I think that's where you and I like connected in terms of like seeing a similar vision. What are some of the things that you saw in the classroom, and what are some of the things in your work now with Institute for Child Success? What are some of the things that you're seeing in schools that you would identify as some of the big targets? Like if you had a magic wand and you could change some things, what do you think we need to be looking at?
So I remember my first year teaching. I was teaching kindergarten in San Diego County. It was still half day kindergarten, so I had 32 children in the afternoon. My partner teacher had 32 I had 32 in the morning, she had 32 in the afternoon, and we had like a 20-minute overlap where we had 64 children in the room. It was amazing, let me tell you. So even so, with those challenges, it was a Title I school. Most of the children were learning English for the first time. The strength